Thunderfoot and the Westboro Baptist Church get into a disagreement as to the meaning of Luke chapter 17 verse 34, where there is a reference made to two men in a bed. Well, on first inspection, I'm inclined to agree, believe it or not, with the Westboro Baptist Church in that it doesn't necessarily refer to homosexuality. The custom of two men sharing what the ancient Greeks would have called a kline, which is sort of a half recliner, half bed sort of thing, would have been extremely familiar to the peoples of the ancient Eastern Mediterranean, because thanks to Alexander the Great, Greek culture and the Greek language were the only thing that they had which resembled something like a universal or common culture for the entire area. The word is kline, the ancient Greek word, and I'll leave a link to a picture of one of those below, along with examples of people in klines, I guess. Two men in a kline could mean two men simply sharing one of these things. Generally, I would assume that that's what it would mean, but two men sharing a kline could mean any number of things in and of itself, which could have homoerotic undertones, or perhaps it doesn't. It's unclear. And let's say that it doesn't. It's simply two men at a banquet laying in one of these kline. They were big enough to have two people. But let's explore the idea that perhaps it is a homosexual reference. Ancient homosexuality of the ancient classical world does not resemble ours, our version of homosexuality, in that it was much more strictly defined. There were very powerful taboos regarding homosexuality. For example, if it was homosexuality between two male citizens, there had to be an age gap of at least 10 to 15 years, preferably about 20 years between the two. The younger one would be preferably, say, teenager, late teen. He would be post-puberty, but not quite with the rugged characteristics of a middle-aged male. And the male would have to have the other member of this partnership would have to be a guy, say, in his 40s, who was experienced and who was a mentor as well as perhaps a lover of the younger. It was Erastes and Hieronymus. It was very clearly defined roles. And at a symposion, which is an ancient Greek drinking party, they would sit together on the same couch, the same kline. There was nothing wrong with them hugging each other, even kissing. It was considered quite proper that this should take place, or it depended on the inclinations of the couple. Perhaps they were simply very, very close friends. They didn't necessarily have to have a sexual relationship at all, even an erotic relationship of any way at all, but they could be. But even there, when it was an erotic relationship, it was very carefully defined what could take place and what was considered disgraceful. For example, anal and oral sex were not on. That just was not going to take place, because in order to engage in these activities, one of the two has to take on the role of the active partner, and the other one has to take on the role of the passive partner. Now, the passive partner in this case, to the ancient Greek mind, or the mind of a Hellenized ancient Israeli or Hellenized ancient Syrian or whatever, would have meant he's allowing himself to be treated like a woman, which was a degrading humiliation. So maybe you'd have some fondling, maybe you'd have some petting, but that's about as far as it would go between two respectable adults, between two citizens. It didn't have the real heavy sort of erotic connotations that it does to us. It was also completely divorced from any idea of effeminacy. Effeminacy and homosexuality in the ancient Greek mind were two completely different things. If you were a heterosexual and you were effeminate, you were ridiculed like you wouldn't believe. If you read any of the ancient comics, they just loved to ridicule effeminate people, heterosexual or not. But if you were homosexual and you were masculine, that was perfectly okay. As long as you were overtly masculine, that was perfectly acceptable. Now, that's one type of ancient homosexuality. The other one would have been considered a vice, where a citizen, say, has slaves or visits male prostitutes, non-citizens, where he engages in all the more overtly sexual activities, more purely sexual activities, anal and oral sex, this kind of thing. But it was not considered respectable to do this. It was the same thing as visiting a brothel with women in it. You're not really, it's something that you do which is purely sexual. But the aristocratic homosexuality was considered a purer, higher form of love. It was in many ways considered even higher than heterosexual love. So Jesus would have been speaking about the culture and using points of reference that were familiar to someone living in the ancient Near East. 2 men on a kline was something that would have been common to him. Probably when he went to that banquet and he turned water into wine, he probably sat on a kline with other men. I seriously doubt that he would have had anything to do sexually with the other ones, because at that point he would have been too old for that sort of thing. Unless he had a mentor himself, and we have no evidence whatsoever that he did. But he would have been referring to a social custom that was very well known in the period. So, in a way, the Westboro Baptist Church is right, and so is Thunderfoot when they refer to 2 men in a bed. But also they're both wrong, because if we're referring to 2 respectable men in a bed, it may have had sort of softcore homosexual implications, but not the hardcore, I suppose, implication that Thunderfoot and the Westboro Baptist Church seem to want to either vociferously deny or imply. If we're talking about little things like this, we have to understand what that would have meant in the culture of the day. What it would have meant to someone who heard such a phrase being uttered. And 2 men on a kline, or 2 on a kline, would have been somewhat ambiguous. It may not have been a reference to love between 2 men or 2 women. Just to set the record straight. Thank you.